Hola,
Hi.
hola Natalia.
Hola.
I think we are directly connected now.
Excellent.
Okay, perfect.
Lastly, I would like to inform to the floor, to all of us, about the paper of Martin Ovaere. The paper of Martin Ovaere, as you know, couldn't be presented because his technical problems. But he is going to present his paper in a next seminar of the chair. All of you are going to receive an invitation to participate in this seminar. We are going to use, as usual, technological platform soon. You are going to receive the link and the data of the seminar will be. Thank you for all of you. And now we are to start to begin with the closing ceremony firstly with the keynote speaker and the conference, and after with the usual words to close the event. And good afternoon, Professor Fabra and Professor Garcia Quevedo, Director of the Economic Department of the University in Barcelona. Professor Garcia Quevedo will chair the debate and bring the meeting to a close. And welcome, a very warm welcome, Natalia, and thank you for joining us today. Natalia is in charge of this last session with the paper Competition and the Green Deal. Just allow me some words to present our prestigious keynote speaker. Natalia Fabra is Professor of Economics at Carlos III University, Madrid, and obtained her PhD in 2001 at the European University Institute, Florence. Professor Fabra is Research Fellow at the Center for Economic Policy Research, Associate Member of the Toulouse School of Economics, and Research Fellow at the University of Cambridge Energy Policy Research Group. Also, she belongs to the Economic Advisory Group on Competition Policy of the European Commission. Natalia works in the field of industrial organization with emphasis in energy and environmental economics and regulation and competition policy. Her research papers are published in leading journals such as American Economic Review, Management Science, the Economic Journal, Energy Economics, and the Journal of Industrial Economics, among many others. Professor Fabra is Associate Editor at the Economic Journal and the Journal of Industrial Economics, and her contributions have more than 2,000 citations. Natalia has received two distinguished awards as Spanish Best Young. In 2017, she was awarded with an ERC Consolidator grant covering tourism policy challenges in electricity markets. Is the project for the period 2018-2023. Our keynote speaker has been visiting research fellow at several institutions, including the University of California Energy Institute, Berkeley University, Maxwell College in Oxford University, the Toulouse School of Economics, Northwestern University, and the Energy Policy Research Group of Cambridge, among others. Having known Natalia and her work for many years, it is a very special for me to welcome her here today, and a pleasure to have you lead the closing session. Thank you very much again. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maite, for your very kind words. It's my pleasure to be here with you. It would be much better to have been able to be there with you in Barcelona, but will make it happen some of the time in the future for sure. So today I'm going to be talking about a very topical issue, which is the role that competition policy can play to push for the Green Deal. Part of my research is very much related to this issue, but I would say that above all, I decided to bring in this issue to this keynote lecture today because it's something that is currently being discussed within the European Union. As a matter of fact, the European Commission launched not long ago a call for contributions on this matter, and next Thursday we are going to be discussing at a workshop that is going to take place from 9 to 2 on Thursday, where we are going to be discussing about the exact same topic that I decided to brought here today. So I hope you will forgive me if I bring more questions than answers. This is part of the ongoing debate. So first slide, please. So just to give some of the background, you all know that the European Green Deal was announced in 2019, precisely at the COP in Madrid. It is a very ambitious decarbonization plan that aims at reaching climate neutrality by 2050 and to put us on track to achieve that objective. The Parliament decided that by 2030, which is really around the corner, 10 years' time is really very short time, to achieve 55% reduction in emissions versus 1990 levels. It's clear that beyond being a decarbonization plan, the low carbon activities that are going to be involved in the Green Deal are a very strong catalyst for economic growth, as it will imply that our energy production system will be transformed, will be improving energy efficiency both at the household level as well as the industry, and we are going to completely revolutionize the way we move ourselves, that is the transport sector. So the question is, whereas these objectives are mainly achieved through energy and climate policies and through regulation, what is the role that competition policy can play to push for the achievement of these goals? In the background, the question is current competition policy as we nowadays know it suited for the purpose, or we have to change it in some way? Next slide, please. So the way I'm going to structure my talk, first I'm going to be talking about these broad questions for which I have more questions than answers that have to do with the role of competition policy in enhancing climate policy. I'll be first sharing with you some ideas about the fundamental benefits of competition for sustainability, and then I will go down to the detail on how this reflects on the three main areas of competition policy, that is state control, antitrust, and merger control. And I would like to conclude the talk by sharing with you some results of our recent research that really talk to these issues. In particular, the emphasis that stated control is currently putting on technology neutrality, whether this is the right approach or whether it has to be somehow revisited. And another key issue has to do with mergers involving energy storage. As you know, we need to invest in energy storage in order to facilitate the integration of renewables into electricity system. So we have to make sure that these facilities are operated in an efficient manner, and also the market agents have the right incentives to invest in energy storage. So the question here is, what about market structure? Do we have to be concerned about market structure and therefore about mergers? And what is the role of competition policy in this area? Next slide, please. So let me start with some next slide, please. Let me start with some initial thoughts about the role of competition for sustainability. I'm fully convinced that competition policy has a key role to play in the sustainability agenda, because competition is probably one of the strongest and more effective levers to achieve that we are using fewer resources and that we have incentives to innovate. And as you know, the use of fewer resources and innovation are two building blocks of any sustainability agenda that we can think of. Because firms, they want to gain over their rivals, they manage or they are induced to reduce their costs in order to be able to beat them in offering lower prices. They also have strong incentives to innovate first, so as to become the first mover in a sector in which all decisions will have long-lasting effects. And they also have very strong incentives to develop sustainable products if this is something that consumers value, because if they do so and if they manage to do this better than others, they'll manage to attract more consumers. So competition is provides very strong incentives for the sustainability agenda. On top of that, we have seen this in the past, that through state aid control, we are fostering the use of competitive mechanisms, and this is very important because we know that the public budget and the private budget that is going to be used to invest in the sustainability agenda is limited. This means that we have to make sure that we can do more with the limited budget that we have, and we know that competition is a means to achieve so. We know that sometimes markets fail, and they fail in the presence of externalities. And the tool to avoid that and correct those market failures is regulation. And as you know, Pigouvian taxes are as part of that regulation. So we have to make sure that we have those Pigouvian taxes in place. And once we have them in place, competition policy is going to enhance the effectiveness of this regulation, because it's going to induce firms to internalize those environmental costs into their production and investment decisions, and they are going to have incentives to pass on those environmental costs, which is a necessary condition for consumers to also take those environmental costs into account when taking consumption decisions. So I think that the main question that we are addressing when we are discussing whether we have to relax competition in order to favor the sustainability agenda is whether firms push for sustainability when they compete more or when they compete less. And the work that I've been doing over all these many years, as well as the work of many other scholars, I think allows us to conclude that competition is good for sustainability. So the call for a green antitrust policy should not be a call for less competition enforcement, but rather it should be a call for more and better competition enforcement. Next slide. So let me please go, even if very quickly, over the three main areas of competition policy, and let's see how these broader ideas really reflect into the three main areas of competition policy. As you know, the Green Deal is going to require very heavy investments in order to promote decarbonization, energy efficiency, sustainable mobility, and so on and so forth. And many of these investments are going to be coming through state aid. So it's particularly relevant that we have a state aid control right, because this is going to affect how these resources are going to be channeled into the economy. We have seen in the past that state aid control has contributed to enhancing the effectiveness of the use of the public resources, and I think that a very good example that is very relevant to this question has to do with the 2014 environmental energy aid guidelines that established that the default for procuring renewables were tendering mechanisms. And we have seen in Europe an increasing use of tendering mechanisms, and we have seen how effective that they have been in pushing down the prices for the renewable investments. And this has allowed not only final consumers to benefit from this lower cost, but it has also pushed producers to invest in newer materials and more efficient materials that would also that have also led to the reduction in the cost of deploying renewables. So as you can see, this is a technological progress that somehow has been facilitated through state aid rules. In looking towards the future and towards this even more green ambition, the question is, do we have to adapt the state aid control to this green ambition? And this raises a number of issues. The first one, is state aid control the right tool to prohibit aid to polluting activities, and can it be used as a lever for mitigation. In the recent Hinkley Point C case, the European Court of Justice concluded that the European Commission cannot prohibit state aid unless it distorts competition and trade within the European Union, and therefore it could not be using state aid control as a way to forbid polluting activities. However, the use of the approval of the Recovery and Resilience Facility has allowed to add this green conditionality to state aid. In this case, it's not a state aid, rather it's a European aid that will somehow allow us or allow governments to inject this money into the economy with this green conditionality and with this no harm principle. What the European Court of Justice has also concluded is that whereas aid cannot be forbidden on the basis of environmental damage, the environmental benefits of aid can be taken into account in this balancing test of the positive and the negative effects of aid. So if anything, what this decision has allowed is to be more lenient towards state aid on the basis of sustainability effects. Next slide, please. What about antitrust? As you know, antitrust prohibits the abuse of dominance and the formation of cartels, which is a matter which I believe is key to deploy clean technologies, which is key to avoiding dominant firms to foreclose access to essential facilities. So think, for instance, of access to the power nectar and the interconnection facilities, or access to the infrastructure for charging electric or hydrogen vehicles. So many of these low carbon investments really require access to an infrastructure. So making sure through antitrust that access is not foreclosed is particularly relevant in this area. We have also seen in the past several cartels. So think, for instance, of the trucks case or the ongoing cartel case among the German car producers, that sometimes when firms are involved in a cartel, not only they talk about prices, quantities, and so on and so forth, they also agree, they also collude on delaying the introduction of low carbon technologies. Therefore, this collusive behavior is not only negative for market performance, but it's also negative in terms of delaying the introduction of environmental rules. So do we have to relax antitrust? Do we have to adapt antitrust to the new ambition? And here I have a feeling that sometimes we are using this debate for a kind of, let me call it, green cartel greenwashing, right? So some people, and the Dutch Competition Authority has published a report on sustainability agreements. The question is, should we refer to them as sustainability agreements or rather as green cartels that use the green excuse as an alibi in order to meet and communicate and coordinate beyond these issues? If cooperation is needed for the sustainability agenda, there's other ways to achieve cooperation, for instance, through research joint ventures that are allowed by the current competition rules without having to go into restrictive agreements. Another case which I think is quite informative in this respect is the coal case in 2013. In the Netherlands, some companies agreed to close down the coal plants ahead of time, and the competition authority didn't allow them to do so. In this weighting exercise of the benefits versus the cost, they conclude that the cost that this would have implied in terms of increasing electricity prices was 3 times bigger than the environmental benefits. The firms that were claiming that by closing down these plants, emissions would go down. And the competition authority correctly pointed out that within the ETS system, emissions would not go down unless they decided to pull out those permits out of the system because the cap was binding, and if they stopped emitting, somebody else would do. At the end of the day, it was the regulator who decided on the closure of these plants. So it's clear that some decisions have to be channeled through regulation and not necessarily through restrictive agreements. Next slide, please. The last issue regards mergers. As you know, merger control tries to avoid mergers that are detrimental to welfare. And we know that the competitive pressure provides very strong incentives for firms to introduce new products, to innovate, and so on and so forth. In the Green Deal and in the decarbonization plan, we know that innovation is a key lever to achieve these goals. Without innovation, we won't manage to become carbon neutral by 2050. So if we fear that mergers might jeopardize and reduce firms' incentives to innovate, maybe we should be more cautious, if anything, about mergers in this area than otherwise. So next slide, please. So my understanding, and I'll add a bit more about this later on at the end, is that while it is, I think, a good, it's always good that we debate about competition policy, we should not run the risk of believing that cooperation and market power are good for sustainability, because what the current research is telling us is that it's precisely the reverse. If anything, we have to enforce competition control rather than weaken it. Next slide, please. So let me share with you some of the recent papers that we've been working on that are very much related to this debate. The first one regards technology neutrality. As you know, stated control puts a lot of emphasis on the need to have technology neutral mechanisms. The Commission has been very clear and right in pointing out that technology neutrality is necessary for efficiency. For instance, they say when they are referring to auctions for renewables, that tendering the desired volume of energy across technologies and across borders is the most economically efficient means of reducing cost. So technology neutrality is good for efficiency, but they also reckon that technology neutrality sometimes leads to overcompensation, which, according to them, can be mitigated via banding. Banding, for those of you who are not informed about that, is simply a correction that one can make in technology neutral auctions or technology neutral mechanisms that essentially give a handicap to the weaker technologies over the others in order to level the playing field. Next slide. So implicit in this debate is the recognition that whereas neutrality is good for cost minimization, it creates a risk of overcompensation. So what is not very clear is how to take into account this trade-off and whether banding is the right way to address it. In a recent paper with Juan Pablo Montero, we address precisely this issue. This is a theory paper. For the sake of time, I'm not going to be sharing with you the model, but rather I'm going to be sharing with you some simulations of Spanish electricity auctions that I believe illustrate this trade-off and the fact that sometimes the risk of overcompensation implies that technology-neutral mechanisms are not always optimal mechanisms. First slide. Next slide. Thank you. So what we did was we collected information about all the renewable installations that had asked for permission in Spain over the last 2 years, both solar and wind installation, and with several data sources, we computed at the site level the average cost of those installations. Next slide, please. So with those estimated average cost of these installations, what we did is we built up merit order of all these installations from low average cost to large average cost. So in this figure, what you can see, these red dots represent the solar PV installations, whereas the blue triangles, they represent the wind installations. And we did this thought experiment. Suppose that we want to procure 4,000 megas of renewables in Spain, and we run a single technology neutral auction. This would be the outcome. The average price would be around 30 something, and most of the winning bids would be solar bids. It's clear that because the cost of the winning wind installation is much higher than the cost of the solar installations, these ones, the inframarginal units, could get very high rents. This is costly. Why? Because we have a limited budget, meaning public funds are costly. So even though we are achieving full efficiency in this case, we are leaving rents that are too high to the solar producers. We could procure the same investments with given lower rents. How can we do so? Next slide. One way, as suggested by the Commission, is to use some sort of banding. That is, give a handicap to the wind installation so that they are willing to offer a lower price. So what you can see in these figures compared to the previous one is that the supply function has shifted downwards because of this lower price that the wind installations with a handicap are willing to offer. And what you can see is that indeed the market clearing price goes down, and therefore the rents that we are given to the solar producer goes down at the cost of inducing some inefficiency. Why? Because when we are given a handicap to the wind installations, we are going to be deploying some of these wind installations with higher cost than some of the solar installations that are no longer deployed. Next slide. So if we compare what is the trade-off here in this table, what we are doing, lambda represents the cost of the public funds. So as it grows above zero, it means that we are more concerned about these rents. In this figure, in this table, what you can see is the ratio of the outcomes on the technology neutrality over the outcome under technology banding. And as you can see, as we increase lambda and we are more concerned about rents, with banding, we start giving a higher handicap, which is denoted with alpha to the wind producers. This implies that the cost ratio goes up. So banding results in some type of cost inefficiency. So for instance, in the third row, you see that costs are 2% higher under banding. However, this allows to reduce payments much more. This allows to reduce payments by 14%, meaning that the social costs that take into account both the efficiency as well as the social cost of these extra rents that we are no longer given to the solar producers implies that banding is better than technology neutrality precisely because of this effect of reducing rents. So somehow the Commission is right in saying banding is good because it allows to reduce overcompensation, but is this the only way to reduce this overcompensation? Next slide. The alternative, next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the alternative would be to run separate auctions, one auction for wind and one auction for solar. If we had the same technology neutral allocation, we would have the allocation that is depicted here with these vertical lines. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if we run separate auctions, the regulator or the auctioneer has an extra degree of freedom in that she can choose how much to auction off of these two technologies. And she might find it optimal to reduce the amount that is procured out of the solar producers, that is moving this vertical line to the left, and making up the difference by increasing the allocation to the wind producers, that is moving the blue line to the right. Why could this be optimal? Because by doing so, we reduce by a lot the rents that we are given to the solar producers. And even though we are increasing the price that we are paying to wind, because the cost function is flatter in that region, the overall effect is positive because the increase in the rents for the wind producers is much lower than the reduction in the rents for the solar producers. Next slide. So if we see the same results with the same table format that you see before, you can see again that when we care about payments, that is when lambda is positive, technology specific auctions result in cost inefficiency, leading to higher cost, but the reduction in payments is even stronger than the reduction that we get under banding. So the outcome is more socially efficient than otherwise. This is not a general result. In the paper, we show that this trade-off depends, among others, on the cost asymmetries existing across technologies. When these technologies have very symmetric cost, technology-specific auctions tend to perform better than technology neutrality and than banding. When these costs are more symmetric, then it's better to give up the objective of reducing payments in favor of the objective of maximizing efficiency, and therefore it would be better to go for technology neutrality or for some sort of a weak banding. Conclusion, when we are dealing with technologies that are very different from each other, promoting technology neutrality through state control is not necessarily the best way to use our public resources. Next slide. Great. So let me use the last 5 minutes, I believe, that I have for the talk to share with you some work that we have been doing with storage. This is joint work with David Andres Terezo, who, by the way, is currently in the job market. He's a PhD student from the European University Institute. So the question that we want to address is whether electricity markets provide the right signals for storage firms to operate these facilities in an efficient manner, and whether they have the right incentives to invest and deploy these facilities that are going to be key for the energy transition in the power sector. And in particular, we are concerned about the impact that excessive market power in either the storage segment or the generation segment might imply for this very relevant question. Next slide. So what you see here, this purple line, is nothing but total electricity demand net of renewables production. In the middle of the day, you know that the net demand can go very low because of the production of solar PV. So if a competitive storage owner decided how best to operate this facility, what they would do is they would store when demand is low in the middle of the day and use that stored electricity in order to shave the peaks of demand, that is to produce when demand peaks up. In a competitive market, if the generation market is competitive, these prices also reflect cost. And therefore, when they are engaging in this type of price arbitrage, they are also contributing to reducing the cost of generation. How much will they invest? Well, they will take into account their marginal arbitrage profits against the cost of an extra unit of storage. So essentially, if I invest a little bit more in storage, I will manage to store an extra unit of electricity at the marginal price at which I am buying electricity when I store it, versus the price at which I manage to sell that electricity, which is nothing but the difference between the price at this point, at the price at that point. As you can imagine, if I increase storage capacity, these 2 points are going to get closer to each other, meaning there's diminishing incentives to invest in storage as we deploy more storage capacity, because essentially this is going to imply a flattening of prices over time. Next slide. What we saw yesterday in the Spanish electricity market, what you see here is the price patterns over the day. Just yesterday I saw it and I thought I would like to share this with you, because the price pattern that we saw yesterday was ideal for a storage owner, meaning they could be storing electricity at night when prices went down to zero and sell it in the late afternoon when prices went up to 38. This difference between 38 and 0 is an arbitrage profit, which is given these incentives to deploy storage facilities. But this is just a great example. Unfortunately, things are not like this every day. What happens next slide? We have market power. So how does this picture change? So suppose we have a merger in the storage segment, say a big pump storage firm mergers together with Tesla, thinking that, for instance, Tesla could have entered the Spanish electricity market with big batteries. Now they would concentrate all their storage decisions, and therefore, just as a monopolist, they would internalize the impact that concentrating all their storage facilities at a given moment of time would have on making their purchases more expensive. And at the same time, they will internalize the fact that if they concentrate all their releasing decisions at the same point of time, that would contribute to reducing the price at which they sell their output. So what these firms with market power, they would do, they would distort the optimal use of storage to avoid these price effects. They would smooth their storage decisions out of what would be optimal from a system perspective. And as you can see, not only this makes these curves not as flat as before, but also it approaches these 2 points that are given these marginal arbitrage incentives. So not only they distort the optimal use of the storage facilities, but market power also weakens their incentives to invest in storage. Next slide. Things are even worse if we are thinking not only about horizontal mergers, but rather about vertical mergers. That is a generation company with a large market share in the generation market merging with a storage owner. In this case, this vertically integrated firm not only internalizes the price effects of the storage decision on its own storage, but also on its generation. So the firm would have even stronger incentives to smooth the operation of these storage facilities in order not to depress market prices when they are generating a lot of power. So vertical mergers would result in a more inefficient operation of storage facilities, and because of that reason, this would even further weaken the incentives to invest in storage facilities. This is just to say, next slide, please. This is just to say that when it comes to storage, an essential facility of the energy transition, market structure and therefore merger policy is key, because without optimal storage decision and without optimal investment decisions, simply the energy transition in the power market is not going to take place. Next slide, please. So let me just conclude, if I may, by stressing that I believe that competition policy can highly contribute to achieving the Green Deal objectives by promoting innovation, by promoting that environmental costs are really taken into account by firms and passed on to consumers, and promoting the use of competitive mechanisms that allow us to make more out of the public budget. I believe that competition is a very effective tool for sustainability, and when that is not the case because the market fails, it's better to rely on regulation rather than on market power. Relying on market power is certainly not an efficient way to address sustainability. So if anything, I think that this debate that has just been opened up and that we are going to be discussing about it over the next few months should lead to the conclusion that we should rather strengthen rather than weaken competition. As I said at the beginning, this conference is taking place next Thursday. It's going to be, you can see these on streaming, and hopefully also contribute to this debate that has just opened. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your excellent, splendid conference. Very, very, very interesting. You presented all the points to debate we have now on the table in the sector and to get the Green Deal issues. And I suppose there are a lot of questions. We are limited by the time. And Jose is going to lead the debate. Thank you very much, Natalia.
Thank you, Marta.
I would like also to give thanks to Natalia for this really excellent presentation. And then let's begin with the questions. We have around 10-15 minutes, and I think it's enough time. Then we can begin with a question from Elisa Trujillo.
Hello.
Hello, Lisa.
Hello. First of all, thanks a lot for your presentation. The topic is very interesting and for sure is very timely. So my question is, which one of the three main competition policy areas that you talk about, state aid, antitrust, and merger control, would you consider will probably have a major or primary role in enhancing the energy policy, not the climate policy, but the energy policy in the context of the EU Green Deal?
Thank you, Elisa. I think it's very difficult to tell. All three are very important pieces of competition policy, so all of them are needed. However, my understanding, at least during this phase of the Green Deal, is that the state aid control is going to be very important, because most of the investments are going to be taking place through public funds, whether funds coming from the member states or funds coming from the recovery and resilience facility. So state aid control, I think, can be very powerful in hopefully, if we manage being used as a lever for more environmental friendly activities, and also as a lever for mitigation. So think, for instance, what has happened during this crisis in the aviation industry. We have seen how the various member states have given up to 33 billion euro to the airline companies, with very few green conditionality. Only the Austrian and the French government have added green conditionality to the aid given to their airline companies. So I think that if we give away public money, and if together we have decided that the green agenda is going to be one of the key policy objectives of our generation, I think it would be very contradictory to, on the one hand, be pushing for the Green Deal, and on the other hand, be giving away money for polluting activities. So I am confident that through state aid control, we are going to be managing to redirect the economy towards those activities that are sustainable and away from those that are polluting activities. At the same time as we can use state aid control as a rule book in order to promote the use of competitive mechanisms, and this is going to be critical for the recovery fund. We have a significant amount of funds that we are going to be allocating to the private sector. So it is key that we make most of this money, and one way to do so is to rely on competitive mechanisms, and I think that state aid control can be a powerful way to push for this.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Again, and now we'll have a question from François Cohen.
Well, thank you very much, Natalia, for this very enlightening and interesting presentation. I wanted to go back to this question of technology neutral, that is technology-specific mechanisms. And I thought maybe there are reasons why the European Commission would prefer one or the other that you didn't discuss. So, for example, the fact that if you have a technology-neutral mechanism, maybe it's a bit more previsible for companies to know what will happen. And versus, for example, technology-specific mechanisms, they could create some form of distortions if you have some companies that go for some technologies and so on. So I wanted to have your opinion about this.
Yeah, of course, there can be reasons outside the reasons that we highlight in the model, but precisely regarding the reason that you pointing out, which is the importance, which I fully share with you, of providing some certainty to the industrial sector so that they can build up the resources to provide the necessary equipment for these new investments. I think that for that matter, a technology-specific approach provides more certainty, it provides a plan as to what is going to be happening, rather than relying on technology-neutral mechanisms, out of which the allocation is uncertain until it takes place. For instance, the Spanish government has already made public a calendar of how much per technology they want to invest or they want to auction off for the next 5 years. So the Spanish government is relying on a hybrid of technology neutral and technology mechanisms. What they are doing is that, and they just took place last week, for those of you who are aware, last week the first Spanish renewable auction of this decade took place. So this auction was a technology neutral auction with minimum technology quotas. So it was an auction for 3,000 megas with a minimum technology quota of 1,000 for solar PV and 1,000 of wind, meaning that if the outcome of this technology neutral auction was interior, that is, it respected this minimum allocation, the outcome would be just as if they had run a technology neutral auction. Otherwise, if there was a corner solution, meaning that these minimum technology quotas were binding, the outcome would have been the same as if ex ante they would have run two separate auctions, one for wind and one for solar. There might be a concern about technology-specific auctions, which has to do with political economy considerations. So lobby groups might try to affect the decision of the regulator as to how much to auction in one technology or the other, rather than letting the auction decide. But let me tell you that there's also many lobbying groups that are lobbying for the Commission to run these technology neutral auctions because they are not affecting the quantity allocation, but these technology neutral auctions result in overcompensation. So some firms are really seeking this overcompensation, and therefore they are really pushing for technology neutrality, even in cases in which technology neutrality need not be the optimal mechanism. So in the paper, which I said is mainly a theory paper, we start by characterizing the optimal mechanism. And then we analyze mechanisms that are used in practice, and we compare those mechanisms against the optimal mechanism. Well, the optimal mechanism is a product mix auction such that the two technologies are traded within the same auction, but each of them, they get a different price. So in a sense, the optimal mechanism is closer to a technology-specific approach rather than to a technology-neutral approach. So my understanding is that the Commission is right in pointing out that technology-neutral mechanisms are better for efficiency, but it is somehow overlooking the fact that this overcompensation, that these rents that we are living with investors are essentially having a very high opportunity cost, because they imply that all the budget that we are giving away in the form of rents, we are not using it to be deploying other low carbon technologies. If we put these two pieces together, there is a trade-off, and the solution to that trade-off is not technology neutrality.
Thank you very much. It was very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Two last questions from the floor. One is regarding the relationship between competition and innovation. And as you know, long-term projects will require cooperation between firms. How does this fit in your analysis? And the last one is a question from Martin Ovade, that regarding your work with Professor Juan Pablo Montero. And he asks, how does the analysis change when you use pay-as-bid instead of pay-as-clear auctions?
Okay, so it's true that sometimes innovation requires cooperation, but this cooperation could take different forms and not necessarily a merger. When two firms merge, they don't have incentives to compete because now they form part of the same company, and therefore they no longer have this competitive pressure to innovate in order to become better than the rival. The absence of this competitive pressure diminishes the incentives to invest in innovation, something that has been recently studied by, among others, Giulio Federico in the context of the telecom industry. If firms need to cooperate in order to develop better products or in order to come up with better innovative solutions, they can do that through research joint ventures. But mergers need not be the best solution to this cooperation need. In the paper with Juan Pablo Montero, it's true that we concentrate attention on uniform price auction. We do not consider pay-as-bid. We understand, however, that the trade-off is the same, even though the modeling would be somehow different. And we believe that the outcome would be similar because in a pay-as-bid auction, all the bidders would try to bid close to the expected market clearing price. And therefore, even if you pay all the winning bidders according to their bid, that bid is going to be close to the market clearing price. Therefore, the rents are going to be there. And even though the pay-as-bid system promotes more competition as compared to the uniform price auction, it does not fully eliminate the rent, and therefore the rent efficiency trade-off that we point out in the paper.
Thank you very much again, Natalia. I think with this presentation, we close our symposium with this very, very nice and excellent presentation. And let me say only to finish and to close the symposium, only just some farewell words also on behalf of Professor Maria Teresa Costa. First, we would like to thank everyone who has been here online, unfortunately, but here with us today, especially to us keynote speakers, to Claudia and Natalia, to all the presenters, and to the chairs, Monica, Giulietti, and Andreas Rocher. Thank you very much for your contributions. We would like also to thank the participants for the quality of the questions and the debate. And as is usual in these closing words, we would like to remind you that we are going to contact a high impact journal in order to publish a special issue or a special session of the papers presented today. We will send more details to the authors, to the speakers, by email. And we want to say also that last year's papers are currently in revision in energy policy. Also, we would like to thank the scientific committee and the organizing committee for excellent work, evaluating the papers, selecting and organizing this. Let me also give thanks to Joan Batalla for his support as director of Funseam. And also thank you very much to the director of the IB, to Professor Durante, and to Martí Parellada, who is the president of the IB. Thank you again. Thank you also very much to the research group of the chair of energy sustainability, to Elisa Trujillo, Francois Cohen, Joan Batalla, Daniel Davi, and also the PhD students, Jordi Planellas and Juan Ducal. And I think very, very special thanks to our project manager and also researcher in the chair, Elisenda Jové. Her work has been really crucial for the success of this symposium. And as you know, all the symposiums require, and particularly this one online, that it's a change in our lives, require the efforts of many people that have worked in the institutional part, in the logistical part. And then we would like also to give thanks to the administrative staff of the IB, to Susana, to Maria Angels, and also the administrative team at Funseam, to Deborah and the other people. And that's all. Stay safe. And then we hope to see you in person, really, really in person next year. That's all. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.